Now there are certain guidelines for foreign banks as well, because you're allowing certain foreign banks to invest or to operate in India, because and the customers will be Indian, so you have to make sure there are guidelines to protect the customer of our country. Foreign banks would be permitted to operate in India through any of the three channels. So there are only three channels through which they can operate, right? So there is a question for you. What are the channels through which foreign bank can operate in India, right? So these are the three channels. First is branches. Second is wholly owned subsidiaries. Lastly, subsidiaries with total foreign investment up to the max limit of 74% in a private bank, right? So there are three things that are three channels. First is branches. Second, wholly owned subsidiaries, if a foreign bank basically owning a subsidiary in our country. Lastly, subsidiaries with total foreign investment up to max limit of 74%, right? 26% should be with someone else, but up to 74% they are allowed. The minimum capital requirement is USD $25 million. 25 million US dollars, which would be spread over three branches. So the minimum capital requirement for a foreign bank to operate in India is $25 million, which would be spread over three branches. The offsite ATMs would require separate licenses. So if they want to open up some ATMs, so they need separate licenses. Foreign banks need to keep 20% of their profit from Indian operation as deposits with RBI. So this is an important point and crucial point for everyone to know, not only for your examination purpose, but also for a knowledge wise, because foreign banks, these are operating in India, they are getting customers from India. Certainly they are earning from Indians. Now RBI has made sure that they have to keep 20% of their profit from Indian operations as deposit with RBI, right? So they have to keep 20% of their profit from Indian operation as deposit with RBI, right? So these are the guidelines on foreign bank by RBI. Now the next thing that we have to discuss is regional rural bank, RRB. You must have heard of this term because RRB conduct their examination as well. So that is regional rural bank. Now, while if we talk about Indian banking history, initially we focused on few cities, few metropolitan cities, and then tier 2 cities. But you know, banking services took a hit while we're talking about the villages, right? So the government came up with this RRB is another scheduled bank. It is mentioned in the second schedule of the RBI Act 1934, and a regional rural bank. So when on which recommendation of the which committee they were set up, these were set up on the recommendation of the Narsimham committee working group, right? So you have to answer another question that comes up for you. When was the Narsimham committee set up, right? You have to mention the year in which it was set up, and when was their report came out. So you have to answer about Narsimham committee, and you can easily get a question from here, because Narsimham was RBI governor for a brief period as well. So you can answer that as well. During which years Mr. Narsimham was the RBI governor, and the number as well. Like seventh RBI governor, eighth RBI governor. You have to respond in the comment section. So these are all the questions for you. Everything that you have to do, like after this class, you have to read about Narsimham committee. So these were set up on the recommendation of Narsimham committee working group during the tenure of Indira Gandhi's government, with a view to include rural areas into economic mainstream. Right. The view behind setting up of rural banks was to include rural areas into economic mainstream, because the rural people, they don't have a bank account, right? So let's assume they don't have any bank account. So what, their money is just getting out of the economic system, right? So we need that money, because those people, when they save in bank, our whole capital grows, right? I have talked about this multiple times, so I hope everyone is clear till now why the saving in banks is important. So during the tenure of Indira Gandhi's government, 1975, with a view to include rural areas into economic mainstream, since that time about 70% of Indian population was of rural orientation. We are talking about 1975. 70% of Indian population was of rural orientation. So this number was a huge number then. It's still a huge number. We need to focus on regional rural bank. Now, as I said, question for you is when was the year RBI was established? That's the first question. The answer for you, which you have to mention in the comment section. Second question is you have to talk about the Narsimham committee. When was this committee set up, and what were the major recommendations? And one of the recommendation is setting of regional rural bank. And what was the tenure of M. Narsimham as RBI governor, in which year he was appointed as RBI governor, and what was his number, like seventh RBI governor, eighth RBI governor. So you have to respond all of about all these questions in the comment section, right? So regional rural banks are also known as Gramin banks, and comes under Indian scheduled banks, right? As I have just talked about that. Right. So they have been created with a view of serving primarily the rural areas of India with basic banking and financial services. So you get basic banking and financial services through Gramin banks, right? They are regional rural banks are also known as Gramin banks. Gramin banks is certainly, for all those who are not familiar with English, right? So the major purposes of regional rural bank was to provide banking facilities to rural and semi-urban areas, carrying out government operations like disbursement of wages of Manrega workers, distribution of pension, etc. So these banks not only they provide you basic banking services, they also were set up to provide other services as well. First, distribution of wages of Manrega workers, right? And then there is distribution of pension, etc. Because there must be some people who must be working for a while in government sectors, or old age people who needed some pension, they were depositing some money. So everything was being carried out through regional rural bank. And you have to think about this from the perspective that 70% of our population was uh, categorized under rural population, right, back then. Providing para banking facilities like locker facilities, debit and credit cards. So these are the facilities that has come up with time, like providing locker facilities, debit and credit cards, because Indians usually keep a lot amount of saving in forms of gold. So what basically they can do is providing them locker facilities so that they can keep their gold safe with bank as well. So providing para banking facilities like locker facilities, debit and credit cards, small financial banks. So you can basically categorize them as small financial banks. So question from this regional rural bank, in which year they were set up? You have got the answer, 1975. You have to mention about Mr. Narsimham committee in the comment section. You have to respond everything related to it. I have asked the questions on it, so you have to respond. Regional rural banks are also known as Gramin banks, right? And they provide the basic banking facilities. They carry out operations like disbursement of Manrega, Manrega worker wages and distribution of pension, etc. So this was regional rural bank, a major milestone in our banking sectors. So this is all about regional rural bank. Next we'll talk about cooperative banks. So cooperative banks are owned by their customer and followed the cooperative principle of one person, one vote. So you must have heard of cooperatives, right? So cooperative banks are owned by the customers. They are owned by their own customers and they follow one person, one vote rule. Cooperative banks are often regulated under both banking and cooperative legislation. So they come under regulated under the banking section as well, and they have their own set of legislation as well. So cooperative bank are often regulated by both of them. They provide services such as savings and loan to non-members as well as members. So they also provide services like savings and loans to non-members as well as to members, and some participant in the wholesale markets for bonds, money and even equity. So there are some of the cooperative banks participate in equity market and in the bond market as well. Many cooperative banks are traded on public stock markets, with the result they are partially owned by non-members, right? If they are being traded on stock market, if they are trading on stock market, even I can buy some particular share. By if I'm buying some particular share, I'm buying their ownership as well. So many cooperative banks are traded on public stock market, with the result that they are partially owned by non-members. Member control is diluted by these outside stakes, so they may be regarded as semi-cooperative, right? So let's suppose if I have bought some particular shares now, their ownership, the member ownership, those who are the members of the cooperative, their stake is being diluted, and they can be called as semi-cooperative banks. So cooperative banks, the main purpose was back then when they were introduced was to finance agriculture sector. One of the major contributors contributing sector, primary sector of our GDP was agriculture sector. It still is a major role, it still plays a major role, but back then it was the you can say the biggest sector, right? The primary sector. So cooperative banks were there to provide the finance. People were pooling their resources. So cooperative banks are owned by the customers, and they used to follow the basic rule, one person one vote. But now with time they have changed as well. Now they are participating in equity market. When they are participating in the equity market, they are losing out their ownership, so they can be called as semi cooperative as well. And they are providing loans and providing all such banking services as well. So these are cooperative banks. And we'll talk about we'll touch upon just one more thing: Basel Accords, right? So Basel is a city in Switzerland, right? It is headquarters of Bureau of International Settlement, right? So it is the headquarters of Bureau of International Settlement. You need to know the Basel Accords. So there are three Basel Accords till now. Basel one 1988. India I think adopted it in 1999. Then there is Basel two. I think that was India was adopted that in 2008 or 2009, and there is Basel three norms as well. So, it is the headquarters of the Bureau of International Settlement, which fosters cooperation among central banks with the common goal of financial stability and common standards of banking regulations, right? The Basel Accords refers to the banking supervision accords, recommendation and banking regulation, right? So these are issued by Basel Committee on Banking Supervision. India is also a part of it. Now basically what happens, there are central bank in a country that basically is there to regulate and everything, right? There for that there is central bank. Now there are different central banks in different countries. So to have a coordination and to have a global financial stability, there are Basel Accords that are being followed by different countries, right? So Basel 1, Basel 2, Basel 3. These are the Basel Accords. Every Basel Accord, bring up something new, new changes, and Basel 1 had something different, Basel 2 has something different, and then Basel 3. Every Basel came up with a different accords. Now it has been followed by all the members and the central banks as well, right? So because there should be a collaboration between different central banks, these accords are there, and you have to remember the year in which they come, what were the purposes as well. So about that I will cover it next time, because uh, there are certain limitations. So we'll cover about Basel Accords, Basel 1, Basel 2, Basel 3 in next video, and that will be all for today's class. Um, do remember to answer the question firstly, in which year RBI was established. You have to answer that first question. Second, you have to talk about uh, Mr. Narsimham committee. When was the committee set up, and what was the tenure of Mr. Narsimham as RBI governor, and what was the particular number associated with his tenure, like seventh RBI governor, eighth RBI governor. You have to respond like that. So we have discussed about SBI. We have discussed about the banking system. What are the scheduled banks? We have discussed a lot in this video, right? And this is a pretty informative video. I think those who have watched this video till the end, right, you must be you must have learned something new. That was the whole purpose, and you need and to prepare you for your examination as well. So I think that will be all from my side. But I hope that most of the viewers, those who are watching the video, do respond in the comment section to the question that I have asked. And if you're liking the content that we are providing, please do leave a like and certainly subscribe to the channel as well, because I will be coming with another video on this unit and we'll discuss something more. I might touch upon Basel Accord as well, because those are very important. You will definitely get a question about Basel Accords, and certainly from the things that I have covered in the today's class. So yeah, if you're liking the content, please do leave a like, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, do leave us up to the channel as well. And that will be all. We'll meet in the next video where I will cover the unit 7. And thank you.